When you first enter the develop module, the first thing that you see are tons and tons of settings, and they can be quite overwhelming. But you don't have to worry, we will go over them one by one, step by step, and we will try to understand each setting, what it does, and how can we use it to make our photos better. Lightroom is a very non-destructive editing software, which means that if I edit the photos here and I do whatever I want with it, I can make it black and white, I can do anything with it, I can always go back and reset it. How? I can press the shift key, I can hold the shift key and press the reset button, it takes the photo exactly back where it was. So this is a very interesting tool to know, and this is a very interesting thing to have, because if you have edited a photo and a few weeks later you don't like it, you want to come back and change it, so the original file is there and it's preserved as it was. Thing to keep in mind is that Lightroom works best with the raw files. Raw files are the uncompressed form of photos that your camera takes. So there is one JPEG format and there is the raw format. In this course, we are mostly going to be working with the raw files because raw files have more information in them. So we can see this picture is really dark in this example. The first thing that you would want to do is obviously increase the exposure. But if I increase the exposure, a lot of things increase with it. And this is not good. You don't want this sort of highlight. So what happens really is exposure is made up of three things: highlights, shadows and midtones. Whenever I increase the exposure, it also increases the highlights, the shadows and the midtones. And whenever I decrease it, it decreases those values as well. So in Lightroom, it's always equal and opposite reaction. So whenever I increase one setting in Lightroom, it's also going to affect another setting. So the first thing that you would want to do is obviously decrease the highlights, but it does not bring much back. We're going to try decreasing the whites. It brings some of it back, but not much. There's one setting left here. This is called the contrast. What is contrast? Contrast is actually the difference between your highlights and shadows. We're going to take a look at another example from where we can get a much better idea of contrast. Yeah, here. Let's zoom in here and add some exposure. Right. So you see here, this is the highlights side, this is the shadows side, and somewhere in the middle are the midtones. If I decrease the exposure, you see the difference between the highlights and the shadows starts getting less. And if I increase the contrast, the difference between highlights and shadows starts getting more and more. So contrast is the difference between highlights and shadows. What we're going to do here, I'm going to turn this off. We're going to decrease the contrast. So we start to see some of that. And we're going to open up the shadows. Once that, we're going to fix a little bit of that. And this. Let's see the before and after. There's a lot of difference, but there are still a lot of problems with this photo. But we're going to come back to it. We're going to learn more about the other settings and then come back to this. Let's go and talk about texture, clarity and dehaze. Let's take this picture as an example. We can see it's extremely dark. What we can do is add some exposure, add it until the sky starts blowing out. Then what we do, we decrease the contrast so we start to see the difference, and then we add shadows, decrease the highlights, and we start to see the sky now. Add some contrast back just to get more that sharpness, and then what we do is we add clarity to it. So what is clarity? Clarity is pretty much like sharpness, but it's going to be very dark and edgy. So if you keep increasing that to too much, it's going to make your picture look very unrealistic and it's going to add a lot of noise. So it's best always to leave it at like 20 or 30 if you want. And we can add some texture. It works pretty much like sharpness, but it adds some of more of the details in it. And then we add some vibrance in it. Much better, and there is a lot of difference in it. We can add some saturation to make the greens more visible. Very nice. So this is the before and this is the after. So these are the basic setup that you would do in order to start your editing process. This is not the editing itself. This is basically the part where we try to see what information we have, and then we open it and bring it to a point from where we can start working on it. From here onwards, we are going to try to bring the information back and try to preserve whatever is there in the picture. Before we go on to that, let's talk about the white balance and the color profiles. What is white balance in actuality? So white balance is when all of the values of RGB are equal to 100, which means your camera knows that this is the white color. For example, if I pick a color picker and I tell my camera that this maroon is the white color, so the camera is going to take that as an example and apply it to the rest of the picture. And if we go and tell the camera that this is the white color, yeah, it fixes the color temperature. But I don't prefer to use this color picker tool. I always want to do this manually by dialing it down, trying to find that sweet spot where you find the picture in a much convenient way. You also have options like as short, auto, daylight, shade, tungsten, custom, flash. We're going to go with custom. So it's always best to find a color temperature that fits your signature style of shooting. So let's go to color profiles. Profiles, we have Adobe Color, Adobe Landscape, Adobe Portrait. Let's try all of them out. They are very slightly minutely different. You can go into browse and see more profiles, Adobe Raw. Again, these are like not final effects, but this is to give you a starting point from where you can start the editing process, or which look you like, and then you can start working on it and start building it and take it up from there. This is very interesting, but no. Okay, I think I liked this one, yeah. Adobe Vivid. Add some shadows, increase the contrast to make it more. Yeah. See the before and after. So yeah, this is one thing that you can do just to start off. Just to go over what we learned in the last lesson, let's just edit this photo using only those tools. So the first problem that we see in this picture is it's very dark, and secondly, the white balance is not in its place. So the first thing we would do is increase the exposure just a bit, just to see what we have, and it's extremely yellow, it's green. We have to fix all of that. We can try the auto. It's okayish. I think we can add a bit more of the magenta and yeah, somewhere around here. So yeah, we see there's a lot of contrast, there's a lot of noise, her skin is extremely bad. What we're going to do is we're going to decrease the contrast so we start seeing the information that we have. Next, we see the highlights are pretty blown out. We're going to bring them down. We're going to open up the shadows just a bit. Bring the contrast back so we can see some depth. Yeah. Let's see the before and after. I think we can add a bit of exposure. So you can use the plus key to add exposure. Yeah, it looks good now. So all we did is used these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These 7 tools to make this photo from looking like this to looking like this.